All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the North Face Speaker Series. I'm your host, Stan Evans. I'm a commercial photographer out of Los Angeles. And today's our guest is Jeff Staple, a creative visionary with work encompassing creative direction, fashion design, footwear design, brand marketing, and he has been a driving force in defining what streetwear is. If you aren't aware of his podcast, The Business of Hype, you should be, because it is one of the best marketing assets on the internet today. And I love watching and tuning in. And today we're going to chat about the current take on these topics. So let's get right into it. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stan. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Just chilling over here in LA. How about you? How are things in New York?
I'm freezing my buns off in New York. So,
well, we better get you an upside down over there and get things taken care of.
I got the North Face on right now. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I just wanted to get right into it because people know who you are, and I want to talk about the crossover between music, fashion, and extreme skiing, and the first connection really that I saw between mainstream skiing and Black culture and winter sports. Which for me, I was diving back kind of into the archives, and I really looked at it, and I was checking out Blizzard of Oz, which was directed by Greg Stump, which kind of in the scheme of things in these days, he's kind of like the definitive white Mars Blackman, from the Jordan commercials. Do you know? And so realistically in this part, he did this thing where they're doing a selection of skiers for his movie, right? And they're all skiing in the segment in Squaw Valley, and they had the background to go-go music. And if you don't know go-go music, go-go is kind of a late 80s, early 90s dance hall type of music, kind of bred out of Washington, D.C. And it was the first time I'd really seen or heard Black culture used in a ski film in that way. Right. And so for me, I was just like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? Check this out, because for a young Black kid, I was in Alaska at the time. And so I'd seen Scott Schmidt and Glenn Plake and stuff like that and people in Warren Miller movies, but taking it to a Greg Stump film, I was like, okay, so I thought that was a really interesting start right there.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that sort of Basquiat, Lee Kiona's Debbie Harry moment, right? Where there's kind of a merging of these two things that are normally considered completely separate, start blending together.
Mm-hmm. And I think that can kind of we can go deeper into that, but also that was kind of the whole burgeoning emergence of steep tech, right? And so I look at steep tech as you and I being on these different paths, but parallel. So I was living in Montana and you're, in the East Coast. So I'm seeing steep tech being used Scott Schmidt and Dan Donnelly in Groove in the Key of Ski. So Greg Stump did a segment on that. And Dan Donnelly and Scott Schmidt are both wearing steep tech in this Alaska segment. And so looking at that and how it transcribes into New York, into a Method Man video, and his two of his background people in the video were rocking steep tech.
Right. It's crazy because when I was sort of in high school, this is now in the early 90s, I would spend my days hanging out on Broadway downtown in the Village in Soho. And there was a couple of stores back then that were really iconic. David Z is one of them, Active Warehouse, Broadway Sneakers, Canal Street Sneakers. And these are the type of stores where they would wrap the sneakers in saran wrap so that you wouldn't get fingerprints on them. It was that type of a store. And they, the people who worked in the store, the people who hung out on the store were all head to toe steep tech or Nuptse or Denali's. And it was just the way they reinterpreted innovative technical performance gear into fashion was so fresh and dope. And of course, I couldn't afford any steep tech at all. That stuff was so expensive, but just the aspiration of man, I want to be as fly as these guys. And to be quite honest, at the time, not really understanding the technical need that you were understanding from skiing and snowboarding. I didn't understand why you needed that stuff, but taped seams, for example, great example of I don't know why a kid in New York needs taped seams, but it looks fresh as hell. You know what I mean?
Hudson Winter Valley wind off the lake there, but it's funny because when you think about Steve Tech, and it was like funny because people don't really understand, like at the day, they have elbow pads and like shoulder pads and like zip-in pockets, which had foam, and then it had like butt pads and knee pads. And so the whole thing about that, because it was designed by Scott Schmidt, right, was he would like leap into chutes and he would do a smear turn. And so like doing a smear turn like that is like, honestly, you have pads in your butt so you wouldn't bust your ass,
Yeah,
and so like, elbow, so it was like protection for like if you like tumbled and things like that. And so it's funny, like seeing how that goes, and that had pit zips and like vents, things like that for hiking, but then seeing that being translated into urban areas, right? Yeah. And so
I know why those elbow pads and butt pads are helpful in the city, right?
Yeah. So like, hear your take on that, like how it kind of like in city culture. And so like, I wanted you to kind of delve into that story.
Yeah, I mean the story goes that the reason why technical apparel like North Face, like Timberland became so big in the late 80s and early 90s is because the dope boys would be wearing them. When you stand out on a street corner for 8 hours a day, just standing there in 20-degree weather or 10 below, it's going to get cold. And oftentimes you're leaning up against a concrete wall, a brick wall. And so you need the reinforcements just like the skiers and snowboarders do, but for a vastly different reason. And I even remember like the pits were dope because when it was freezing cold outside, and then you go into like a store that has heat on, you would just start doing, you would do the zip.
Like so when you get on the subway.
Yeah, the subway, exactly. Yeah.
Like when you get crowded, it's all crowded in there after you've been off the street. So like, you need those pit zips, right?
Yeah. So it's fun. And I would guess that North Face was not intending for that to be the use case. Yeah. But we urbanites and city dwellers figured out the use case for those innovative technologies. So it's pretty cool.
Well, it's funny because even just things like the waist belt, like the cinch strap for your waist, so it's snow skirt.
Yep.
Well, basically graffiti artists could boost spray cans to like steal stuff.
Yeah.
Put it in their pockets and like walk out of the store with it and that. And it's funny because obviously we're diving into the circumstances of drug dealing and street culture and things like that. And it's kind of a touchy subject, we're kind of like going about this thing, but I think something that's really important to understand is you can't shun street culture and the circumstances that created it and then turn around and capitalize off it, which you see a lot of companies nowadays trying to do. They see the cool vibe of it, Yeah. They don't want to understand the story of it, and they don't want to like talk to the originators like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys can watch that, the Beats by Dre commercial that just dropped this week, it's incredible. I mean, it talks exactly to that. You can't take something and love only little bits and pieces of it, and then keep everything else out of it. Yeah.
So I think you have to pay homage to like the day one creators, and I think that's a big thing of like looking at like originators and fashion connoisseurs like Dapper Dan, from Harlem. So it's just funny looking at while he was biting Gucci culture and like making these different things, these leather patterns, and selling it like on street corners, out of his own shop. Like they actually the cops came and shut down his whole cease and desist in his store. And so looking at Gucci doing the cease and desist with them, and then actually going about realizing, oh man, we actually need to celebrate this guy. Yep. He's an originator. He's in these streets. He's developing this cred. And that credibility gave our brand credibility in the streets, like Dapper Dan did that, know?
Totally.
And them going and working on a deal with Dapper Dan to bring him in-house to Gucci and have him do things. And that's the right equitable way to like reward those day one visionaries.
Yeah. Yep. And similar story happened with Supreme and Louis Vuitton. Back in the day, Supreme was sort of remixing LV logos, and LV ended up sending a cease and desist and a lawsuit to Supreme. And then just a couple of years ago, they came together for an official collaboration. So those kind of like moments of recognition for the underground, the bleeding edge, the taboo is really cool to see like kind of corporate America say like, no, you guys actually were part of the ingredients and the reasons of why we are here today. So it's a nice sort of nod of recognition.
And honestly, that kind of takes me into the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about is like some of the guests on your show on the Hype Business, like Business of Hype, sorry. They are fascinating. They're amazing guests that we get, like just a wealth of knowledge. And so I was really impressed with the Kirby Gene Raymond. He actually talks directly about that, about connectivity to customer. And so just being that and being involved and being conscious of your customer and what they want and what their kind of demands and what they're looking for, and just being aware, right? And so I think that kind of like goes to a little bit. And then also Drika Lingnick, talking about who works for Timberland now and like worked for Nike for a long time doing God, what was her job? You actually, I can't remember. She had the like longest title in your
global energy head of collaboration, and so it was like a long
it needs an acronym.
Yeah. And he was basically responsible for Virgil Abloh and Off-White and Nike and Sakai and Nike and Tom Sachs and Nike, and you're basically like you're like a brand DJ is how I like to think of it.
Yeah,
you know, you're taking two records and you're trying to figure out where the beats match, you know.
And so one of the things I really liked about the conversation you had with her, and one of the things I really respected about that conversation, is that she was a great person who worked on spotting talent and cultivating talent, not stifling, you know? And so I think a lot of these brands are looking for people, but they're kind of trying to like, how can you come into our brand and do it kind of our way and then just kind of like make us hot, you know? And so like the thing that like looking at what Drika did in some of the collaborations and the way she looks at the world, she seems like she has a very curious nature. And one of the things that I liked about it is like, I almost like fascinated when I looked at it as like, she's kind of like the Debbie Harry of footwear, you know?
She's a great conductor.
Yeah, she's a great conductor. So like when you look at that and like the originators of like, you know, of hip hop, and she is the kind of people who kind of put Fab Five Freddy and like Basquiat DJing on their stage. Like she turned her audience onto what they were doing, but she didn't steal the show. She was kind of like, here I am, and I'm with this show. Check out what these guys are doing.
Right. You know? That's a very difficult personality character trait to find in people, because most people who can operate at such a high level and have meaningful talks with people like visionary people like Virgil or Sakai or something like that, you know, oftentimes those people are very, very alpha, right? They're very like A type, triple A type. And then, but to find that same person to be able to be like, okay, here you guys go. Let me now go behind the stage. I don't need any of the fame, the guts, or the glory. You guys do it. That's a rare personality trait. You know what I mean? And so that's why people like you mentioned, Kirby, Drika, you know, these people are really special. John Jay is another one that I would highly recommend you listen to from what I interviewed. But yeah, it's amazing. I love to call them conductors, you know, like these are people that, you know, even I use the conductor analogy because even if you have like a great drummer and a great flute player and a great pianist separately, without the conductor sort of like harmonizing them and making sure they're performing at their best, they could sort of be offshoot and not as successful as they could be together as a group collaborating. And that's really the power of great collaboration. You know, collaboration nowadays is such an overused word, and shame because it's not automatic. It's not a layup. Doing great collaborations is not like, it shouldn't be a checkbox on your PowerPoint presentation. Oh, we need great collabs. Let's get some great collabs in. You know, like it's not that easy. These are organically driven things, and if they're not organic, the public nowadays, especially young people, especially Gen Z, they can really smell like a BS collaboration, and then you're just wasting your time, money, and energy.
And I think that comes down to really too when you're actually looking at collaborations and looking at like having forethought to create something like this sharp spear tip, right? And getting people in so they don't necessarily like just drink the Kool-Aid and put out more stuff like that. Like it's interesting talking to brands now because of the whole Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and people wanting to get into multicultural marketing and wanting to actually talk to Black people, but not necessarily know how to talk to Black people. And with me, it's kind of funny because you tell them kind of like what's going on in a very straightforward manner, and it's hard for them to kind of like relate or kind of understand. And sometimes you need them to understand that like they need that kind of anarchy. Like, I am the anarchy, you know, like it's anarchy changes, it creates a catalyst for change, you know? So like I come in and like, even like sometimes like, I know with the meetings I've had with North Face, they're kind of like, where's this Stan guy coming from? But like, I literally like, I am the anarchy, you know? And like I create these different like kind of like, and then we make something great.
Well, I want to say something to like leaders who are in a position of power right now in this politically, you know, Black Lives Matter driven state. I think the best thing a lot of these leaders can do oftentimes is just listen and then allow the experts to do what it is that they need to do. There are times similar to what we're saying with Drika, where you don't have to meddle and have your hands on something. Having the wherewithal and, quite honestly, the grace and the power to say, this is not my lane. I'm going to allow you, give you the resources. Yeah, tell the story that needs to be told in your way. I think that's really powerful to be able to step aside like that.
Well, it's funny because it gets back to, I was watching a talk that Virgil was doing. He was talking about, let's be known for the ideas and the execution.
Yeah.
So I think it's something like that where people a lot of times just want you to come in with the ideas and they're like, okay, we got it here. We got it from here. And like, it's like, but yeah, that's like, honestly, once you got it from here, that's where you're going to mess it up. And it was really interesting listening to your talk with Drika, and she was talking about how like her initial interview, the person who interviewed her didn't want to hire her. And then his colleague talked to him and he told him about her. And he was like, no, you need to hire her because she's so different. She's so thinking outside the box.
Right.
That's what we need. And this is what our brand needs. And this is what our company needs to move forward and progress, because like we're constantly progressing. People get stuck into the battleship rather than a speedboat narrative. I'm like, honestly, right now with COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter and women's equality and stuff like that, you need to be more of a speedboat than a battleship, you know?
Exactly.
So speaking into the next thing of diving in, let's talk about that VFco acquisition of Supreme for $2.1 billion.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in case people don't know, North Face is parent company is VF Corp, which just acquired for a valuation of $2.1 billion, a skateboard brand.
Yeah,
born in Soho, New York, that had one store on Lafayette about 30 years ago. And it's incredible because this brand called Supreme, it has a cult following, probably trades on the fact of being very exclusive, very covetable, very hard to get, right? Making things in very limited quantities. And now you have, essentially, you talk about that analogy, like Supreme is the ultimate best built speedboat there is. And VF Corp is a battleship, right? So it's funny that this battleship is now saying, like, we need this speedboat. The big question will be, can they allow Supreme to remain the speedboat that they are, or are they going to force Supreme to become a tugboat or a battleship of its own, you know? And to me, it's interesting to trade off a valuation of a couple of $1 billion with exclusivity, because those two things normally don't go hand in hand. So it'll be a very interesting tightrope walk to see how they do that.
So I've got a great analogy for that, and I just thought of it this morning, right? It's like thinking about barbecues and black people and potato salad. Okay. Right? Stay with me on this one, right?
Go for it. I'm ready.
So my mom makes the best potato salad, like the absolute best potato salad, right? And so it's like one of those things when like people have the barbecue and think of that, and like let's say like VFco is having the barbecue, all of a sudden like black people are like, we got this. We're bringing the potato salad. Like, you know, like it's like we'll bring the potato salad. It's gonna be all good. But it's like one of those things. Like all of a sudden, if they go and like make the potato salad, try and make it themselves, they're gonna kind of mess it up, and the barbecue is gonna be kind of whack.
Yeah,
You know, like a little thing like that, where realistically, all you need to do is just pay my mom to make more potato salad. You know, like just like. Don't mess with the recipe. She's got
the recipe.
Exactly. You got this. And you know what? She'll bring it and it'll be awesome. And we're going to have a great barbecue.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like, but there's a certain point where like potato salad, like it's just one of those things, like with black people, it's like, we got this. Yeah. Like, no, we don't want raisins in it. We don't want anything. Like, we don't like some weird hoity-toity, like new age potato salad you're trying to make. Like, We got this one.
Yep.
You know,
I got it.
So it's just funny looking at that and seeing, you know, because that's a direct initiative of people indexing on Black culture and street culture in general. I mean, it basically got valued at $2.1 billion.
Yeah.
See a narrative of that, and they're looking to get their money out of it. And so when you look at that and you look at brands and you look at multicultural marketing, right there is a very like transparent way of where they see the world going. You know, the world's getting smaller. It's getting more intertwined.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at how to go about and do it, you need to be able to connect with these different people in different ways.
Right.
And there's
really only two ways to do it, right? Either you figure out yourself how to do it if you're VF, or you invest and buy into a brand who's doing an incredible job of it. That's really the only two ways to communicate and expand your audience.
Yeah, and like another example that I kind of want to bring up too, which is kind of right now, is like we're looking at LeBron James and Maverick Carter's new media company, Spring Hill Entertainment. So in the midst of a pandemic, they got investment of $100 million.
Yeah,
we're talking a global, worldwide pandemic. So if you look at a Black-owned media company, it's going to be telling stories for different marketers and different entities like that. For them to come to $100 million investing, that means people are leaning into it and they're understanding the value of multicultural dollar and how much people are trying to spend and where the future is going to go with sports and entertainment and music and equipment and outdoors. And so it's going that route, you know.
Yeah.
Every brand needs to start figuring it out now.
Yeah. I mean, similarly speaking, like, you know, our brand Staple, we've had an incredible 2020, knock on wood. Like our 2020 is going to outpace 2019. And it's supposed to be a terrible year. You read all the reports about fashion is dead, you know, in the time of COVID, everyone's struggling. But I think one of the secrets for us is like being able to maintain that authentic voice and having something to connect to. I don't think it's a case where like people are not buying things anymore. I think they're being much more careful and selective about what they're putting their money on, you know? And we've seen it ourselves where like when we drop something, it still flies, it still sells out right away. And I think our fan base that we've been developing and honing for the past couple of decades is appreciative of the fact that we're still out here hustling and doing the thing that we do.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which I was going to say is, what's one of your favorite collabs this year that you've done?
Damn, there's so many. I mean, probably the one recently, to be honest, is like we just did a Hello Kitty collaboration. Which is dope because Hello Kitty is obviously geared towards women and kids, and we don't make women's wear and we don't make kids. We make men's wear, but it was an interesting sort of thing of like how much can we expand on our audience base and how much can kids and parents of those kids and girls wear men's streetwear. It was like a nice blending of, you know, gender, unisex, age. It was like all these things that were being bent. And every collaboration that we do, we try to really like bend the rules and come out of left field on stuff. And we've got a lot more coming out this year. The other one that we recently did that I'm really proud of is we worked with a shoe designer and customizer named the Shoe Surgeon. And we did these shoes that were called the Just Votes. And essentially what you had to do in order to get a pair was to prove that you voted. And we didn't say you had to vote.
ACLU?
Yep. Yeah, we worked with the ACLU as well. And that was a real head flip too. And just hearing kids, like we heard hundreds, if not thousands of kids saying like, I literally would not have voted if you didn't dangle this carrot in front of me. And some will argue that like, oh, you shouldn't be commercializing and capitalizing on this movement. But it's like, yo, to me, it's like whatever gets their foot in the door to get them to be aware of it. If it happens to be a show, so be it, because now they're going to get hooked on this ability to make change, which is really dope.
I know. It's like we still have the Georgia election coming up now, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. So diving deeper into that, I wanted to talk to you because, I mean, like, and get your take on multicultural marketing from what ad agencies are doing, because something that was really interesting to me was checking out the latest Nike ad where they did the split screen with White and Kennedy. Like that one was like, it was really good. And then just seeing what actually North Face's ad agency Sid Lee did with their whole reset campaign, and just the authenticity which it went about telling athlete stories, like watching some of these pieces with the narration and seeing the different climbers and some of the pain and struggles that they've gone through, it really humanized what's going on in the world with me. Like seeing how that, and like it resonated. And so I like seeing those different campaigns and something that weaves a personal message that resonates with customers. So I want to kind of get your take on that.
Yeah, it's raising the bar. It's really just elevating everything. You know, people at agencies and brand owners, they just have to step their game up. They can't come out with like, hey, buy this 2 for 1, buy one get one free. You know, it's gotta. Those are not gonna last now. You know, you really have to tell a true, authentic story. And I think, you know, if you can picture these sort of like meetings that are happening in boardrooms with like keynotes and like whiteboarding.
Oh man, PowerPoints.
Yeah, PowerPoints, but people have to stop with the BS.
Yeah.
Get to the root of people, human nature, what people are going through now. And if there's any silver lining of this pandemic and of the Black Lives Matter movement, is that it's making people really look in the mirror and check themselves. You know what I mean? And some of this is what you're seeing in some of the advertising that you're mentioning. It's just shining through where like it's showing that real messages can happen without detriment to your brand. I think the past thinking was always like, oh, if we were too honest, we might lose customers or we might lose business. But you can see, I mean, you mentioned the Kaepernick thing as well. Like these are brands that are like doing better and better while telling the truth at the same time.
Yeah, it's building more quality into your brands. Like it's like people, they're putting a personal emotion with your brand. All of a sudden, it evokes a feeling. Like when you like watch that North Face commercial or you watch that Nike commercial, it evokes an emotion, and you're like, when you're spending your dollar, you're actually proud to spend the dollar.
Yeah,
because of the emotion and the message that they are sending. And so like by that, as a consumer, it makes you honestly psychologically feel better about yourself because of like this message that they're going thing, and that you're actually supporting it by consuming.
Right. Think of it this way. Like you mentioned the word awareness, and they're showing that they have awareness, and in showing that they are aware, they're showing that they're awake. Mm-hmm. Right. And the opposite of that is that they're asleep. Mm-hmm. Why would people want to support a brand that is asleep? Mm-hmm. I want to support brands that are aware and are awake. I don't want to support brands that are sleeping at the wheel. So for a brand, just think of it as simply as that. Like we want to look like we're awake. That's it. And we're aware. And it's funny how like the words woke, like, you know, woke and awake and aware are so like similar. And then the opposite of those are just like sleeping, dead, dusty. Like you don't want to be that, you know what I mean? But if you're not acknowledging what's happening now, then you are asleep at the wheel.
Gotcha. No, for sure. And I just was curious because I wanted to talk to you a little bit, like, because like Chime had done a really interesting infomercial with 21 Savage talking about financial literacy, and then looking at kind of like the Beats by Dre that we just talked about, the whole "If You Love Me." Yeah,
amazing, powerful. Yep.
For sure. And I just think that's an interesting thing of looking at the credibility that way and honestly letting people tell their story in an authentic way.
Yeah.
And I think that was the interesting thing of just like some of the heritage of the North Face with their brand is talking about different people and their heritage and honestly, that's kind of like the interesting thing about the whole Steep Tech and like Alex Lowe and like Conrad, and just like it's a long history of developing things in the outdoors and being aware of trying to get people to this space, you know? And so I think that was a really interesting thing talking about that. And it's like, I've been talking with Conrad, and it's just like, he's such an interesting person because he encourages diversity and encourages curiosity and he encourages like that quality of life. And he talks about some of like his things with climbing and past North Face trips with being involved with the Nepalese community. And I think the way that he looks at culture is the way that kind of like maybe I'm looking at culture in the outdoors and you're looking at culture in streetwear. And I think that's an interesting way of like keeping that curiosity, but also maintaining. And I think that's the interesting thing of like looking at the whole reset, right? Like it's like kind of like changing your brain to honestly like open your eyes and look at what's going on around you and be more aware, and then making kind of conscious decisions on your surroundings, how you're affecting people, how you're affecting yourself, how you're affecting the world, like with climate change.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned the 21 Savage thing and how he talks about financial advice. And that was a great campaign. And if you look at the podcast that you mentioned, I do, The Business of Hype, we've interviewed over like 100 people now. And the common thread that I try to do when I interview these people is not just talk about the story of believe in what you do, follow your passion, follow your dreams. That's not enough anymore. Like we know we should follow our dreams, but like how much debt should I take out? How many lawyers do I need? You know, what kind of copywriting do I need to do? Like how many credit cards should I max out? These are the questions that I really want to get out of people, because I think the young generation now, when they're starting out, whether it's like their first job out of college, trying to start a brand, they really want like the hard facts. They don't need sugarcoating anymore, you know?
No,
so
for sure, giving qualitative information. And I think that's an interesting thing. Like one thing that Drika talks about in your show is having the linear thought pattern, as well as kind of like sporadic thought pattern. You know, it's like being able to combine the two of like, you want to create these amazing art pieces and you want to create these notions. You want to go to these different places and do these different things. And like, you want to move the world, but realistically, like sometimes like building the house means having a great foundation. Like, you know, and like you kind of have to like kind of figure out how to lay those bricks and lay those bricks right, or your house is going to come down.
Yep.
And so sometimes that's learning yourself. Sometimes that's helping others to do that. And sometimes it's honestly people, like when we're talking about companies, right? And they're looking at bringing people in from multicultural marketing. Sometimes it's like they've built a great foundation and they need kind of anarchists to kind of come and paint the room orange.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, so because that's what's going to set it off when you open the entryway, you know?
Yeah. And the way I see it is like, there's two types of people in the world. One are like what I call T-shaped people, meaning like they go across a horizon line, and then other ones are I-shaped people, meaning they go deep, like down, you know. And I-shaped people, like they're very focused on one or two things, but they get like 30,000 feet deep into it. Whereas T-shaped people can juggle 50 different things at the same time, but they never get really deep into any of them. They just sort of go across the board. Now, if you're an I-shaped person, you should know that you need T-shaped people in your team, and vice versa. There's very few people who can hop the line between T and I. You know, like Drika, you mentioned, is a great example of a dual-sided person. But yeah, like just know that, like, okay, I am very hyper focused on this one thing. I need team players that will think wider for me, and vice versa.
No, and that's honestly like kind of coming into this collab and kind of, or not collabs, but coming into this space of doing this stuff with the North Face. Like I have two great mentors basically that have kind of come about as far as like, one's Arturo Nunez, who ran Nike basketball. Like if you haven't had him, you should get him on your show. He's amazing. He's the godfather, he's the OG. And honestly, just with talking with Conrad, it's like I feel like I'm the weird child of these two fathers. Yeah. Who are guiding my hand kind of thing, because I lived in DC for a while, but I lived in Alaska mainly. And so I've got this weird connection of both street and mountains, and I'm seeing these things in different ways and different paths. And so I think that's where looking at how to go about connecting people into the city wear and streetwear and outdoors, it's like building this bridge. Yep. And we're like, you know, like people used to stand on these other sides of these cliffs and look at one side or the other here and one side or the other here. And what we're slowly trying to do is we're trying to just like build this bridge where people kind of like can connect together, you know?
I had the opportunity to do a talk on the North Face channel over the summer with Ashima Shiraishi, one of their athletes. And she is the embodiment of what you just said. Like she's a city girl, born and raised in Manhattan in Central Park, but is one of the best climbers in the world and can climb any degree of mountain or rock anywhere, you know, but hails from Chelsea, New York City.
Awesome. Yeah, I've looked into her. She seems fascinating.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Okay. So the one thing I actually do want to ask you a little bit about is just like kind of circling back to like Supreme and like some of the the Mason Margiela collabs that you've kind of been working on in that regard, and kind of see how you see those fitting together in this matrix that we're kind of creating this bridge.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I just recently got the Margiela. I have it here actually. I mean, check out this. So you've seen this sort of like kind of classic like North Face fleece jacket, right? But check out this Margiela one.
Okay.
It's a circle.
That's awesome.
Can you see this?
Yeah, no, I got that. I'm checking it out for sure.
The whole thing is a circle. It's amazing, and it fits amazingly, you know. And you know that, and I'm actually wearing a North Face Sakai shirt right now. If you check it out, they've got like the whole
zipper,
that kind of zipper action with the placket on a t-shirt, on a flash dry t-shirt, you know. And it's just, I love the innovation of taking high fashion, street fashion, graffiti. You know, there's a Gucci collaboration coming as well. Like just taking all of these worlds and just putting them into like a Vitamix blender and just blending it up and then seeing what comes out of it, you know? And I think I love that kind of thinking. It's so dope. And it really is another way of innovation. There's the traditional word of innovation, which North Face is so good at, but then there's innovative thinking as well. And I think any brand, even if you don't have, you know, a multi-million-dollar R&D lab and a testing center, you can be innovative as well, you know?
And it's like funny because I mean, here's the thing that's interesting with me. I'm such a like function-oriented person. Like all my stuff is like super function-oriented. Like it's like, I mean, I'm probably not that fashionable, all to be completely honest. Like my fashion is non-fashion, but it's like, but I love functionality and seeing how things go, and kind of interesting of like, again, I mean to circle back to Drika, but she was talking about how like designers, like there's got to be a reason for it being blue, and there's got to be a reason for it like being a color of that kind of pattern. And the thing that's really interesting to me of diving into the urban and the city and like culture of that is like, there doesn't have to be reasons for things. It's just the way that people are feeling, or the way they actually want to like go about doing stuff, or just checking things out. And I think that's really amazing because it all of a sudden, like in a weird kind of sense, when you're coming from such a functional type A brain of mind, it frees my mind.
Yeah.
Like it frees up, and like it gets me kind of like creatively thinking about how to see the world in a different space, and also like seeing what's going on in different people's heads. Like it's like, it was interesting, like when I'm living in New York and kind of checking out like 5 Points, and then going and seeing what like the PS MoMA was doing. Like, you know how they do like dance parties over there on the weekends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was the most interesting thing of like going into that space and like seeing they had food vendors and they had music and they had DJs, and you could wander through different rooms and art.
At a museum, like that's weird, right? Like at a museum is kind of not what you would expect.
And it's great. Like it was like such an amazing thing. And so like looking at that, it's like almost like that's what we're kind of trying to build this new world around, you know?
Yeah.
Like it was just like
break the definitions, man. Break those rules, break those defined roles of like, oh, you're a museum, you shouldn't be having live food and DJs, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like a new humanity theme park.
Yeah. Or quite frankly, like when I had my streetwear store, I had art exhibitions out of there, and people were saying like, why do you think you're a museum? Like, why are you having art shows at a streetwear store? You know, it's like, why not?
Inspiration, like anything's inspiration, you know? So I think that's a good way to kind of go about and try and keeping inspiration and keeping curious. And I think kind of the last thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on for me and was curious about was looking at how you're connecting with people in a digital space in COVID times. Like, I mean, that's where I'm curious, because like just pivoting brands and stuff where like people don't have touch points and ways to go and like see your collabs in person and things like that. How are you getting that word out there? How are you kind of pivoting from like, you know, like the Reed art department, stuff like that? How are you going about doing that?
Yeah, to me, I mean, the digital space is really just another delivery platform, right? Okay. Like I remember, and you're going to remember these days too, where everything was done in print and everything needed to be 600 dpi, CMYK, saved as an EPS or a TIFF, saved onto a zip drive, FedEx to a printer. You get blue lines, you get proofs. This was like to make one ad or one poster. It was hundreds of hours of work to make this one thing. And so what happens as a result of that is that people are super careful, super dialed. They cross every T, dot every I before they send something to print. The equivalent of that today is an IG post, right? And you could literally do that while you're sitting on your toilet bowl. right? And if you mess up the caption, you can hit the edit button.
Yeah, you can go back.
Yep. If you mess up the photo, delete the post, repost it, right? And so because now there's this very much more carefree way of doing things, I think there's this issue that's happening where people who are making comments on social media, whether it's on Twitter or in the comments of Instagram, they are mistaking creating commentary as creating content. And they're really two very separate things, you know? And, you know, you said you grew up in DC as well. So you know that, like, if you see two people having an argument in the street, and if you stepped up to those two people in person and you're like, yo, you shut the fuck up and you shut the fuck, like, you're going to get your ass whooped, right?
Yeah, consequence.
Yeah, there's consequence. But today, you could just be like, yo, you suck, shut up. And like, there's no, you could build a burner account, you know, like it's, and people think that that's
KD on them.
Like, people just need to recognize that, like, you know, to be more mindful, like you were just saying, about things that they put out there. Things that they put out in the internet. The thing about the internet is the internet never forgets.
Yeah.
You put out a tweet and you want to delete it, someone's taking a screenshot of that, and that's just going to live on forever, you know? So I would advise people to still have the ability to take consequence in what they're doing, still cross the T's, still dot the I's, even though it's all social. And I think because we take the time, effort, and sweat equity that we put into even just like a tweet or an IG post, I think our consumers and our fans recognize that we put that DNA into everything that we do, and they pay it back to us for that. It's a blessing.
Credibility.
Yeah, I guess that's credibility. Yeah, but yeah.
Sure, like just being thoughtful in your credibility and like coming with a purpose. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up there. And just from here on out, trying to come out with a purpose. And thank you so much for joining, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, North Face, too. Shout out to North Face for allowing us to have this platform too. It's
for sure.
I was walking down memory lane on my IG stories about my relationship with North Face as a kid, and it's just amazing that we're here right now. You know, it's freaking cool.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I had a Steep Tech outfit myself, so it was kind of funny, just like so random. So yeah, great stuff.
Well, if you wanna keep in touch, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Jeff Staple. And thanks a lot to everyone for tuning in.
Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Peace.
You got an opinion? We'd love to hear it. Leave a comment down below and hit the like button to subscribe.